Hi guys, welcome back to our 11th lecture. And in today's lecture, our topic is array. So this is me, Altaf Khan, and I'm your C++ tutor. So we're just going to start our 11th lecture. And in this lecture, we're going to discuss about array, how to declare an array, how to initialize an array, why do we use arrays in C++ programming language. So let's get started, guys. First of all, you guys should know that what is an array. So you see that what is an array. So to be honest, that array is a collection of objects. Array is a collection of objects having same data type. Now, this is very important topic. You guys don't have to miss it, right? If you are watching it on YouTube, please leave the comments in the comment section if you have any problems. So as you can see that an array is a collection of objects having same data type. So what is an object here? Object can be anything. That can be a number, a string, right? So you see that all of them are called objects, like a string, right? A string, a character, an integer. These all are called basically called objects. So we have objects of different types. But when objects of same data types are collected and stored in a reserved area, in a reserved container, you can say, then that is called an array. And remember that all of these objects that you store in an array will be stored in the memory in a series of addresses. Like that would be in a series, right? That would not be scattered in the memory. They will be having addresses in a series. You see that whenever we store something in RAM or storage, each file resides on an address. If there are no addresses, there will be nothing, right? Like we cannot store any data without address. So honestly, that's an extra information, but to be honest, that an array is a collection of objects having same data type. So now let's work with it practically, that how to declare an array and how we can store objects of having same data type. And why do we use arrays? That's also a question. So I'm just going to clear all these questions. And this is a kind of complicated one, but I'm sure we can deal with it. It's not that much complicated if you study it thoroughly. So now I'm just going to open up my compiler and I'm just going to show you how to declare an array and how to initialize an array. What are the components of an array? And I'm just going to open up my compiler. Yeah, so it's just loading, right? We're here. Let me remove my previous program. And in today's lecture, we're talking about array. So declaring an array, declaration of array. You see that as we declare a simple variable, there's also a process of to declare an array. So what is that process? There are some steps that you need to follow in order to declare an array. So what is the first step? First of all, you have to determine the data type of all these objects, all those objects that you are going to store in this array. Suppose I want an array of integers. I want to declare an array in which I will be storing only integers. So just simply write down that a data type of objects that you want to store in this array. So suppose int, right? I just want to store all these objects having a data type int. And now you have to tell the name of an array. So what could be name of an array? Suppose X. That is the name of an array. As we have names in variables, we have different sorts of names in variables. The same applies for arrays as well. So we have a name for an array as well. Now there's a question that how many items do you want to store in an array? Do you want to store 5 items? Do you want to store 6 objects, 10 objects, and so on? So that depends on you. But you have to tell the compiler that I want to store that X amount of objects or items in this array, right? Array just works like a container. So now you have to identify the size of an array. Suppose I want to store 5 integers, 5 objects in an array. So this is called the 5 that I've written in curly braces is known as the size of an array. This is the name of an array, and this is the data type of the array. So now I've simply declared the array, but I want to initialize an array, right? I want to assign values to this array. I want to store values in this array at the time of declaration. So then you'll have to use assignment operator, then you'll have to use curly braces, and it ends with terminator symbol as usual. So now you can store 5 values here, 5 objects here, items here, having same data type, and that same data type would be integer because I declared this array with the data type integer. That's why I will be storing only integers in this array. So suppose I have 5 integers, 2, 5, 7, 10, and remember that these objects that will be separated by simply a comma. So that's it. Suppose I have these 5 integers. I want to store these 5 integers in this array. So now internally, if we talk internally, these values will be having some addresses in the memory. These values will be having some addresses in the memory, but keep in mind that those addresses that in which these will be stored will be in a series. That would be in an order. That would not be scattered, right? What do you mean can't display? I don't get you, man. Come on, ask your questions if you have any. So now I have simply stored these 5 values in this array. Now let's talk about its use there. Why do we use array? Suppose you have a classroom and there are a number of students, there are 20 or 30 students, and now that seems complicated if you declare variable for each student. So that would be an efficient idea to just store those student names or their marks or their roll numbers just in a simple array. Just name this array and store all of those students' values. That can be their roll numbers, their exam marks, whatever, their grades, whatever that you want to store. So you see that? That's why we use array. This makes your work a lot easier. So this is the declaration of array. Now the question arises that how to access array. Access of array. You see that I've stored these values. Now I want to access these values. So how do we do that? What if I want to just print 10 out of this array on my screen? So what I will be doing here, first of all, I will use cout as usual because I want to display something on screen to the user. So I would use cout and then the array name, which is X in this case. And then in these curly braces, you have to simply tell the address of this object. You see that there are the addresses that are defined for these values internally are way more different than the one that we use in order to access them. Now for 2, we have the address 0, and for 5 we have 1, and this address for 7 is 2, this is 3, this is 4. Remember that these addresses, these locations starts with from 0, and it keeps going on until the array is finished. You see that? So addresses for these values starts from 0, always 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I want to access this 10, I would simply need to write 3 because these addresses starts with 0. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you just have to simply type 3 here, and that's it. That's how you access an object or an item from an array. All right, so let me just save it by pressing Control S, and now I'm just going to compile this program and see if that is working. So now it's compiling and we're done, guys. Let me run the program by pressing F10, and you guys can check out the result. I got 10 on my screen, which is stored in the address tree, right? As I told you guys earlier, that the addresses for these objects, for these items, starts from 0 and it keeps going on. These addresses are being incremented by 1 each time we store another value in an array. So you see that 0, 1, the address for 2 is 0, the address for 5 is 1, and then 2, and then 3. So if I type 3 here, I will get 10 on my screen. So that's the way of accessing a specific item or specific object from an array. So you should keep this simple syntax in mind. Now there are question arises that what if I want to store all of these values at once? Suppose you have an array and you have stored about 100 values or whatever, but that's just a big number. You store a big number of values in an array. And now that would be complicated if I just type one by one here, that's out and x0, and then in the next line I type I access the second item, the third one, and so on. That would be time consuming. So what can I do here? What is the best option for me? The best option for me is using loops. So as you guys can see, that the loops play a big role in programming. So for this purpose, I would be using for loop. You can try for loop, while loop, whatever you want. But in this case, or me personally, I would go with the for loop. So now the question arises that I want to access all these values. I want to print all these values at once just by using a loop, because you see that we are having 5 values. What if these values we were having 20, 30, 40 values? That would be hard and that would make your code lengthy. So for this purpose, we can use loop in order to print all these values, in order to access each and every element that is stored in this array. So for this purpose, I would go with for loop and I equals to 0, right? So let me set my counter and the condition. So if I is less than or equal to 4, as you guys can see that the addresses again starts from 0. So I would put 4 here, and then I value is going to be decremented by 1. So let me make the body for the for loop, and that's done. Now what I need to do, I need to simply type cout here, and then what I will be doing here, I will write down the name of the array, and then the curly braces I'll put I, and then I'll put I, and then I'll also break this line. So now it's done. Let me compile this program and see if that's working. Now it's already being compiled, guys. As you guys can see the result on the screen, you can check it out. We got all the values on the screen that I have stored in this array, in X array. So you see that I got each element on my screen in separate line, because I've used end line. I've used this manipulator in order to break this line and get each item in separate line. as you guys can see that just by using a loop, I've got all the values on my screen just in a few seconds. So imagine if there were more than 100 values in an array. So that would be complicated to write it one by one using cout. So for this purpose, we use loops to access all the elements of an array. What now there is one another question that I'll be trying to clear. That is, what if I want to store these values in an array at the runtime? Like I want to get these values from the user and then store these values in this array, right? In this array. And then I want to print those values on the screen, right? That's a question. As in the case of variables, what we do in the case of variables, we just simply declare a variable and then we use cin in order to grab the value for that variable and store in that variable. But what we should do for array, like that could be simple. If I just use cin here, right? If I just use cin here and x, but I would have to enter the address for that. That would be again a hard task to perform. So that's why for this purpose, I will also use loop in order to fill this array with all these 5 items. Like in this case, I declare an array with size 5. That means I can store 5 values in this array. So for this purpose, I want to use, I want to use for loop again in order to get values from the user and store all those values in this way, in this array, and then print those values on screen as well. So let me comment it out here. Let me make a comment here. That would be getting values from user on runtime. That's it, using for loop. So how do we do that? Just simply type for loop here, apply for loop, and then int I equals to 0 as the below as similar as the same goes for accessing of an array. So that would be same condition here, and then I value is incremented by 1, and then in this body I'll just simply tell the user enter value enter value in I address, you can say. And then for this purpose, I would use cin here, and then the array name, which is x, and then in these curly braces, output I. So let's see how it's working. Let me just run it by pressing F9. So yeah, now it's compiling, it's done. Let's press F10. Now you guys can see that the result on the screen. I'm being asked to enter value in 0 address. That means enter the value for the first item of this integer array of array x. So suppose I want to store 5 in the first place, and then I got in the second address, in the one address, that means in the second value, I want to store 10. And in the third one, I want to store -6. And in the fourth one, I want to store 4 and then 9. You guys can check the result. I got all these values from the user on runtime. And then by using the for loop, right? By using the same for loop, I got all those values. I printed out all those values on screen there the user has entered. So that would always be different, because that varies on because that depends on the user. Whatever the user enters in these inputs, right, in these entries, that would be printed on screen, right? Because we are just accessing these arrays, we're accessing these elements just by using address. So whatever we have stored in that array, that would be printed on screen here. So this is how we store values in the entire array by using for loop or whatever loop you want to use. You can try with other loops as well. That would work. And then the second part here is that I want to display all those values that are being stored in array X. And I'm done with this. I've done my work here, and I've simply printed all those values here on the screen for the user. So that was, that was a simple concept of arrays. Then why do we use arrays? We use arrays when we have a large number of data and they're having same data type. So we go for declaring an array. We use array for that purpose. And that's it. I guess that was the easiest way I could go through this lecture. And if you still have any question, you can go to the chat option. And if you're watching it on YouTube, then you can just ask your questions. If you have any problem, ask your questions in the comment section. I'll be always around, right? Well, I'm not using Windows 11 because, yeah, I'm just used to Windows 10 and I don't want to update it for now, okay? So that was all about arrays, and we don't have any practice set on array because it's you who has to work with it, with this, with array object. That how do we declare arrays? How to add values to an array on runtime, and how to print them using for loop or any other loop. So this is the code here, and I'm sure this is pretty much of it. We're done with today's lecture, and in the next lecture we will discuss we'll discuss about functions, right? Or we will talk about pointers. Pointer, that's just a simple topic. I'll just discuss a little bit about pointers, but anyway, that's for next time. And that was all for now. I hope that you guys enjoyed this lecture. For now, I'm in the first semester, and I've chosen, you can say, software engineering. So I want to be software engineer in near future. Yeah, and I want to be a programmer as well. So that's it. Thank you guys for watching this lecture, and I would catch you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.